So today I want to welcome Cathy Davenport from Dickinson College. She is the Vice President for Enrollment Management and Dean of Admissions. Welcome, Cathy.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we want to find out a little bit about you. Tell us about your career in higher education and how you came to be in this profession.
Terrific. Absolutely. So first of all, I'm a Dickinson graduate from the class of 1987, and probably like most people did not decide in college I was going to enter as an admissions counselor or enter the field of higher education. I actually didn't do any work at all with the admissions office during my time as an undergrad, but I had a great opportunity to serve on a panel, and someone said, hey, you'd be great doing admissions recruitment work. You should look into that. So I did, and they hired me in 1987. I worked for the college for 3 years, then decided I really enjoyed working with high school age students and decided to go to grad school. So I did my master's in education at the University of Pennsylvania. The program was psychological services in education, which serves me well today. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then I came back to Dickinson in '92, in August of '92, purely to be here for 3 to 4 months while the recruitment staff was traveling. And as typically happens, an opening occurred at a really not great moment in time in September. And so the Dean of Admissions at the time came to me and said, would you be willing to step in, but I'd need a 3-year commitment. And I said, sure, I know I might not want to do this longer term, but sure, I'm happy to step in. And so I did some new travel areas. I worked with our alumni volunteers. I worked with our tour guides. I worked with, lots of different groups, and really decided I was hooked on doing admissions work. So I stayed, and I've been at the college now for 29 years, working my way up originally from an admissions counselor to the role that I'm in today. And it's been terrific. Great opportunities. I've worked under 4 different presidents. I've worked under 4 different vice presidents. And so never really had to leave my place in order to learn from others and to stay engaged with higher ed and the trends that have been happening over the past 30 years.
Wow. So I'm curious, what was your major at Dickinson then?
My major was in psychology, and I had minors in religion and political science. And I thought when I came to Dickinson, I would go to law school. I was going to major in political science and go on to law school. I happened to be the youngest of 4, and so my second brother started law school at the same time I started at Dickinson, and when I saw what he was doing, I was like, oh, that is not at all interesting. I don't want to do that. So I have a sister who's a physician, a brother who's a lawyer, another brother who is entrepreneurial and in computer and programming areas, and then I chose education. So it's it's always interesting when we're together for family get-togethers, the areas that we talk about.
I bet. So you've been in this for that many years. What kind of changes have you seen happen in education or in admissions in particular?
Oh my gosh, huge changes. I think back to when I started in the late 80s, and I was very privileged when I came on board at Dickinson that we, the incoming president-elect of NACAC was Rusty Shunk. So he was in his president-elect year. And so here I am, a brand new admissions officer that fall, going to my very first NACAC conference, which was being held in Milwaukee, and traveling with Rusty to the conference. And myself and another new staff member got to go. And what a great opportunity to learn about the profession, learn about the fantastic people in the profession by being at this very large organizational meeting. And so, seeing him as president-elect, as president, as past president, engaging with people like Joyce Smith as executive director. And, that is not something that happens for a brand new person in the career. So that to me really set the tone. What it also did, though, was introduce me to the issues and trends that were happening. And so I vividly remember in the 80s, the conversations and concerns about test prep. And test prep organizations, and what's that going to do for, SAT and ACT. I remember, the issues surrounding the banking industry and student loans, and, when they used to really go out to financial aid offices and try and cultivate, use our loan programs and so forth. I think about domestic student of color recruitment and access and opportunity. And there were not as many community-based organizations or, you know, counselors and advisors that were really helping first generation college students and helping, new immigrants to the United States. And, different populations know about the college opportunities and college going process. So, international student recruitment, I think many colleges and universities really jumped on board in the last 10 years with international recruitment. And so I'm not sure that all colleges and universities, have been doing the same things for the same periods of time. But those were just some of the differences and trends in the past 30 years that I've seen. Of course, increased cost of attendance, issues about loan debt, and the things that the media picks up on and really puts forward. The most recent, obviously, is the Operation Varsity Blues scandal that has taken place. So, if you go back over a period of time, it seems as though when there's been a concern or an issue, an industry or something has come in to fill a void along the way. And then sometimes people get up in arms about, I don't understand, why is this happening? But, it's important, I think, for families, as well as, even our newly hired staff members here at our admissions office, helping them understand history, helping them understand, where were we, where have we come, how did we get there, what challenges still face us, what opportunities do we have available to us. So, we sometimes have short-term memory about certain things, but it's like, nope, actually, I remember when this was more prominent, the redesigned SAT, people were up in arms about that, right? And so it's really helping people see and understand history so they understand the direction things may be going, and asking good questions. Is this a good trend? Is this a positive? Who is this benefiting? How do we make people better informed about what's happening in the wider world?
Absolutely. And I think that's a very valid point about having that historical perspective and being able to look back and say, okay, this is where we were, and this is where we're going. And so how do you see that having that lens that you can look back at? Is diversity in admissions an ongoing concept, or is the new, now we have other lawsuits about diversity and admissions. Is there a new perspective on that, or something, emphasis that you see happening in that regard?
Sure, and I think it really depends on where a college or university might be located as to, how they would think about their own history in regard to diversity, recruitment and retention and curriculum and programs. So, I'll use Dickinson as an example. When I was a student here in the 80s, we were not very diverse. We were not very geographically diverse. We were more regional. We had students coming from, obviously our home state of Pennsylvania, but Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Washington, D.C., so within our, travel time, right? Car travel time kind of scenario. We were definitely not racially or ethnically diverse in that time frame, and definitely not with international students. And while I know we had students that were, would identify as gay, lesbian, transgender, LGBTQ A plus, they were not out on campus. And, so there were elements of diversity that are not the way we think about and talk about diversity today. And so I think colleges and universities kind of had to take a look at themselves and really think about, who are we serving? Who are the populations of students? Are we looking at traditional age? Are we looking at, those returning from the workforce or coming back to retool with new skill sets? And so I think diversity really became this bigger, broader term that schools chose to use and define in ways that benefited them during their recruitment and planning strategies. I would say for us, it was something we began to focus on in the 90s. But really became truly serious about in the 2000s, because if you really are going to, represent the wider world or prepare students for the wider world, you have to have diverse faculty of different backgrounds and experiences. You have to have administrators from a variety of backgrounds. You have to have staff that are, supporting the students that are here, in addition to the students, because the students need to feel like they're coming to a community that reflects who they are and what they're all about. And programmatically, you have to look at your curriculum, and you have to be able to say, is this true? Is it relevant? Does it fit the needs of students today? We talk a lot about the 21st century skill set and making sure that students can engage in dialogue and conversation with students from a variety of backgrounds. We have a number of students for whom English is not their first language. English might be their second or third language. We value international, intercultural competency. And so if you really believe in these things, if this is truly part of your mission and your vision, then you can't just talk the talk. You have to be able to show and demonstrate this is true, and how is this true. And so I do believe that, diversity on any campus, the work is never going to be done. And for me, it's not about reaching a certain percentage or a certain number, a certain threshold, right? I think it's important that we set ambitious goals, but this work is ongoing all the time, because we're always going to engage with and interact with people like us and people not like us. And that's what's going to help us be more effective in graduate school, in the world of work, in changing careers, being adaptable and flexible in that regard. And so, students today, I'll just give an example. When I think back to my process for searching for a college, it was, here's a very thick catalog with very few pictures, lots of words, and it's a good school, right? You got the recommendation maybe from a family friend or from the counselor. Today, with the websites and with social media and with, students, representing their voice and opinion in lots of different ways and places, you really want to make sure that it's true and authentic to who you are, and not just paying lip service to what people think they want to hear about a place and a space that they might come to.
Right. So what does that look like when it's meeting those needs of those students? And it's exciting to hear the definition of diversity really broadened. We talk about that a lot in my UCLA class that I teach on special issues. And, it can mean lots of different things to different people. And one of the things, like in our area, we have a lot of students who are from multiple race, ethnic or racial backgrounds. And just being able to mark on a form now, just like in the last 2 years, that they can mark they have 2 ethnicities. Before, they were limited. You had to pick one. Well, how do you do that? Right. So what does that look like on campus? What are some examples of meeting those needs of students?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So we have, I'll just give one example, the Landis House. And it's actually called the Landis House because the Landis family owned the house. But in the Landis House is a phenomenal group of people, staff, some of whom are faculty members in addition to running programs, but that is where the Popple Shaw Center for Race and Ethnicity has space. That is where our LGBTQ A+ community has place and has space. That's where our Women and Gender Studies, students and program have place and space. And so just 3 quick examples, and they do a lot of collaboration and a lot of cooperative work together, both in curriculum offerings, in student programs and services, in first year program in transition. The center over the weekend hosted several of our visiting students for our big open house, and they invited them and said, we have peer mentors that they too were first generation students coming to college, or first generation US, or are multi-ethnic backgrounds, and so can't feel like they just check one box, right? Right. Some of these students are exploring religious diversity, right? So maybe, they have been culturally raised Jewish, but they want to know what other opportunities exist for me if I were to come and want to explore my Judaism in a more religious way. And, so the Asbel Center is a terrific resource. And we're in the process of hiring a rabbi, which, is terrific because in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, we do not have a synagogue. Here we do in Harrisburg, but we hold services here on campus, Shabbat services, and then also our local Jewish community, the Beth Tikva community participates. So, it's beyond just the campus. It's beyond just what's happening at Dickinson College. It's what's happening in the greater Carlisle community that our students can feel connected to. We're also trying to help students understand that, this is also about broader dialogue and conversation. This is about perhaps social justice issues. This is about, issues of power, issues of privilege. We help students think about in a variety of ways where they might be personally, based on their own, familial experience, based on their experience where they've grown up, the schools they've attended, and so forth, and help them see that, there is similarity and there is difference. I think the community at Dickinson is very good about collaboration. We do a lot of interdisciplinary teaching. We have interdisciplinary majors. We have a lot of collaboration between co-curricular and extracurricular involvements. We're not, Camelot, but we try and make sure people are aware of. Our president, Margie Ensign, who joined us, it'll be 2 years this coming summer. She came to us from American University in Nigeria, where she had been president for 7 years. And when she chose to come home to the United States, she was looking for an institution that she believed met her vision and her values. And so our international and global perspective, and our science and sustainability initiatives, and our sense of civic engagement, and community action and community learning were very important to her. And so she chose Dickinson because of the work we are doing and the work we will continue to do under her leadership. We don't want to be sitting quietly on the sidelines. We want to be a part of the national dialogue and conversation, but we need to help our own students and our alums really see and understand, what does that mean? What voice is Dickinson bringing to the table? And I think under President Ensign's leadership, it's a voice that really understands local and state and national and global issues and perspectives. And we're fortunate to be in the community of Carlisle. We have the U.S. Army War College across town. So we have a lot of, they bring a new class in every year, and they look at, strategic leadership for those that are serving in various branches of service in the U.S., but 80 international fellows. And so there's a nice engagement and collaboration. The Penn State Dickinson School of Law is right next door. So we have some interaction and engagement with them as well. So in our community of 20,000, there is quite a bit of diversity and dialogue and conversation about how can we do what we're doing and do it even better, not just for the students that come to us, but in the broader term of true community.
Well, and isn't that the true role of an institution of higher education, is to reach out through the community and it's like creating that, becoming the core or the center and having all the waves ripple out throughout the whole community. I think that's very important because that's where the students are learning and growing, and they're all integrated. They're all woven together. They're not separate entities just kind of operating in their own bubbles, right?
No, I totally agree with that. As a matter of fact, President Ensign's been bringing together various academic departments, and I've been going to all of those conversations. And just this morning, we brought together the economics department and the international business and management department. And just listening to the faculty talk about their areas of teaching, their areas of research, but saying, oh, and I collaborate, Steve Earfley, I collaborate with Mike Frattantuano, and we were actually at the start of developing the business program back in 1997. Oh, and I do a lot of work with, Joy Middaugh and the work she's doing. Many of them in their senior seminars that they teach, so 300, 400, 500 level courses, bring in real life community issues right? And they might be working with a nonprofit or a for-profit, and the students become consultants in that work. They're looking at what are the issues, and so they're teasing it apart, not from a textbook, but from real life interviews and dialogues and conversations. And they're understanding, maybe there's a human resource issue. Maybe it's a nonprofit that's having challenges retaining a part-time workforce, and they're approaching that to be able to say, well, what are some of the incentives, or where are we recruiting from? Maybe people don't have transportation, and if you recruit it from those that are able to walk, that might work better. So students really do get to grapple with real life scenarios, which are incredibly advantageous, and they're working in collaboration with each other. So, having students from, I'll say, Southern California, for example, from the greater Los Angeles area, partnering with students who maybe came from more of a rural community, in upstate New York, and saying, well, let me understand your perspective on this. And then how do we look at the literature and the reading about it? And what might we propose as a solution for this organization? So, yeah, I can't agree more than that.
So going back to talking about just the admissions part of this and some of the challenges that we see as we work with students and in the media too, is how do you balance high standards with that goal for diversity in bringing students to your campus? So what are the challenges that you see that the colleges are grappling with, and how are they addressing those issues?
Sure. And, I think that's a challenging question in some respects, because I have expectations that any student who would come to Dickinson is academically well prepared to be successful here, because we also know that there's a lot of other factors that will influence success. Whether they're coming, a student may be coming from a first generation US family, and so parents may not even speak English, or if they do, not well enough that they feel that they can manage the household if that son or daughter goes off to college and is no longer there to help translate or pay for, or whatever those pieces might be. It's also some students coming from areas where their public school was underserved. They did not have the resources to have the levels of classes that maybe other students have had. And so I'm really cognizant of the fact that we want to be sure that students who are applying to Dickinson and who are ultimately admitted because we feel they have the academic preparation necessary, they have prepared well. It doesn't mean that they're going to be immediately successful off the bat, because just the transition to college for many students is huge, right? Sharing a room with somebody, navigating all the social nuances of learning to be in a new place, in a new space, can be really challenging. And so we really want to be sure that students know what the academic resources are. We have a writing center, we have a quantitative reasoning center. Knowing how to navigate the first year. It's like onboarding a new employee. We have a Navigating Dickinson sessions, to help them get to know the work community. The same is true with orientation. And I guess I'm kind of surprised by how minimal some colleges and universities are in their transition and orientation planning to help students find the link, find connection, be able to hit the ground running. Whether it's on an academic side of things, whether it's more on a social emotional side of things, whether it's coming across the country and being in a totally different environment, whatever that might look like. So we have a lot of those conversations early and often to help students be better prepared. But I always like to start from the fact that, we're not doing a service to any student if we're admitting a student and we're already worried about their ability to retain and be successful academically. That to me is a greater concern. And I'd rather have more dialogue and conversation with, the community-based organization or the counselor at that school to say, what is it we're going to do together? If this student is admitted and chooses to come, where might we help that student get better prepared during the summer? Or introduce to them sooner some staff resources, so that they're not coming in feeling like, oh my gosh, I've just moved into my room and I have no idea what to expect about being a first year college student. We're pretty fortunate in the fact that from first to second year, typically between 90 and 92% of our students return for the start of their sophomore year. From first to 4 year, 83, 84% of our students finish on time in 4 years. So again, I think it's community, but I think it's also putting students in front of resources and people right from the start. How do you use a faculty member's office hours? If I'd asked most students on this campus, well, I would only go to office hours if I wasn't doing well and I needed to get caught up. No. You go to office hours when things are going well also, because that's the, paper topic or next semester's classes or, and sometimes we just have to help students understand the resources that are here and how to tap into them and why would you choose to tap into them. So I like to think about it more from an admissions perspective, making sure that as our staff are going and doing school visits or doing, programs in communities, that we're helping staff at those institutions, those organizations to better know and understand the work that we do so that they can say, oh, that might be something we should do now. We should start that with our 10th and 11th and 12th graders. So it's not such a surprise or shock or an unknown. Again, I don't ever want to have to put a student in a situation where they're doubting that they should be here, that they don't feel. And I know, I'm a first generation college student. And I think back, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I think I just had the chutzpah to be kind of like, well, of course I belong here, right? No one's not going to tell me. But again, with social media, with, where students are seeing others who seem to be happier than they are, or it's easier for them someplace else. I don't always see that's a value added. I think that's actually chips away at a student's confidence and sense of ability to be successful. So we're trying to bolster that confidence. We're trying to bolster that sense of you belong here. I mean, that's actually the name of one of our programs is You Belong at Dickinson, because we want that message really conveyed to students clearly and effectively.
Now, I know Dickinson has a test optional, and you mentioned something about test prep. And, there's a lot of debate about and it was even brought up in this whole Varsity Blues scandal, is having the ability or the means to go and do a lot of test prep and raise your scores, and because that's such a big part of the admissions portfolio, profile for students. But many students are coming from a diverse background or underserved background. They don't have those resources at all. So they may have the ability, and it's just not being reflected in their test scores. So, and your school has a long history of being test optional. So what have you found in that regard, in terms of building up the value of tests and versus test optional? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying that we are test optional for our applicants, with the exception of international applicants. We still have found some value in having that information as a piece of the overall application that we're going to review. But for our domestic applicants, our U.S. citizens and permanent residents, they can choose to be test optional. And we've actually been test optional since 1995. And the whole reason we went test optional back then was for access and was for diversity and inclusion. Because we did feel that, yes, while the test prep opportunities were becoming more prevalent, those who already had some advantages were becoming somewhat more advantaged by being able to do that. Now, if you were to talk to people at College Board or at ACT, one of the reasons they've moved to some online things like, Khan Academy and so forth is then, if you have access to a computer, then you really do have access to do your own test prep. You don't have to be, paying for test prep. You would have the opportunity to do that. One of the things that I've seen is that in the 80s and 90s with test prep, students at least you had to sign up, right? You either had to get a tutor or sign up for a class offered through school. You had to participate. You had to go to the classes, take the practice test, do all those things so that when it came time to take the actual test, you had been building up to that. What I see today, going back to Operation Varsity Blues, is that the student was removed in some cases from the process. Someone else took the test. So it wasn't even the student doing the work to get there in some cases. In other cases, it was, changing answers and so forth. But for me, it's kind of like, we're crazy. We got to bring this down, right? We have students who are phenomenal, bright, engaged, articulate, thoughtful, wonderful thoughts and ideas, really great. And they get so wound up about getting a certain test result, or so wound up about getting a certain grade in a class, or so wound up that the joy of learning has been pushed out of the process, right? And I worry about that, because students are not going to college to learn necessarily. They're going to check a box, to get credentialed, to, jump ahead to the next activity. And I'm worried about that to a certain degree, because that's not great for our 17, 18, 19, 24-year-olds, right? They're trying to make choices and decisions with limited information. And so for me, that test optional piece is important, because I think it does send a message that, who you are and the student you are becoming, both through your academic program in high school, the courses you've had, the experiences, clubs, organizations, athletics, whatever it might be, what you're doing now should be informing possible opportunities in the future. It shouldn't be limited. It shouldn't be the defining moment, right? If I don't do these 10 things and do them exceedingly well, I won't get into XYZ school. We have to kind of get back to learning is important. Reading, writing, discussion, debate, speaking other languages. These are important things for us to do. And let's try and not, ratchet it down a little bit.
Yeah.
On, the transference of high expectations. I'm all about goal setting. I have 3 sons. I get it, but I think we need to help people not get so caught up in the test score, the test prep, that we're forgetting about the 3.5 years of academic work that a college or university is going to see. I think we have to be really thoughtful about that.
Yeah. So what can we do? This is our final question and final topic is, you've got an audience of counselors, advisors, people who work with students. So what can we do on our side to help you in the admissions side?
First of all, I thank you to all of you for the great work that you do, because we know this isn't just about the student, it's about the whole family. And we know that whole families these days are a compilation of step siblings and grandparents and divorced and remarried and, same-sex couples. And, we get it. We get it. And so our role, hopefully, is to give you good information, not just give you, a spiel on, some kind of a reply, but real, honest, genuine, authentic information that you can share with a family or many families to help them say, okay, we get it. We understand this. We're real people. Myself, the admissions team, the financial aid team, we're real people. We understand challenge and difficulty, and we understand growth and opportunity. And so, we want to help you do your work with these families. We want to make sure that you have the tools you need to be successful. And so what I like to say is, if you meet me, hopefully you can find me be funny, genuine and humorous on occasion. But if you meet me, that you would say, gosh, I'm going to pick up the phone and call Cathy at Dickinson, because I want to just ask her a question. It might not even do with Dickinson or do with a student interested in Dickinson, but I just want to get her perspective. What might this look like or feel like? And I would hope that any of the folks participating today would say, yeah, I feel like I could pick up the phone and call her. and reference, hey, I heard you on this conversation with Cindy McDonald, and I have a few more questions. That to me is why I do the work I do. This is about partnering. This is about real people. This is about being able to say, you know, Dickinson isn't the right place, or that school asked these questions, right? Because I think we want students to be successful. We want parents to feel good that the student has choices and options, but we need to focus on the students. And sometimes they get lost in the process of doing the college search. They get left behind. It's about them, but they get left behind.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's very sage advice. I think that being, understanding and that welcoming of being able to ask and say, it's a conversation, and it's a job that, a calling. I think for many of us, it's a passion, working together. And I've always felt that it's a partnership, and I loved hearing you reiterate that. So thank you. We do have a couple of questions if we have a little bit of time. We talked about test optional. What about financial aid for students? So apply test optional. Claire asked, do you know if those underserved kids who don't provide test scores get the same level of financial aid? So,
great question. So let me just start quickly on need-based financial aid.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm aware, but this is something you may want to touch base on with different schools, need-based financial aid should not connect to being test optional or not. And I think there is confusion out there amongst parents that if we don't submit testing, we won't be considered for, Pell eligible or work study or whatever those things are. And to my knowledge and understanding, it doesn't impact that, because need-based aid is just that. It's based on the submission of family information, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, perhaps that institution's own form, perhaps the CSS profile form, whatever's being asked, and that's based on family circumstance. With merit scholarships, it is possible that a student is going to be asked to submit standardized testing as a component of several of the other pieces for scholarship consideration. That could even vary with schools that are test optional for admission. So for example, currently, our two top levels of scholarship, we do ask for the submission of an SAT or ACT result, not for our $10,000 or $7,500 scholarships though. Every year we take a look at our scholarship awarding, at our testing information. We could change that policy moving forward. But that is something I would say on the merit scholarship side, you have to look school by school to know if that would be a piece of merit scholarship awarding. But on the need-based side, to my knowledge, no, that shouldn't be a factor for consideration.
Good. And I think that is an important aspect for us to understand the difference between the need and the eligibility applies everywhere versus the merit and how that works. So, and that's where our role as counselors comes in too, is to help kind of people wade through those waters, because it can be a little confusing at times.
Sure.
So, and here's a question about, you mentioned the different programs on campus and things that is done to help encourage students. So does that include first year experiences, or how do you, and is there a year-long course for first year experiences? How does that work?
Sure, terrific. So we have a first year student experience and orientation coordinator. His name is Josh Eisenberg. He's fantastic, and he works with incoming first year students throughout their first year, but he also works in our student leadership and campus engagement office. So we're also looking at leadership opportunities over time. So not just about the first year experience, but what should I be thinking about and transitioning to as a sophomore? 2/3 of our students spend a semester or year studying abroad. Most of them do a Dickinson run program, and that tends to happen during junior year, fall and or spring of junior year, and then returning senior year to living on campus and being very much a part of this community, and perhaps being back in some leadership roles and experiences. So we're very purposeful and intentional with students in helping them think about their authentic interests, both academic as well as in arts, in athletics, in clubs and organizations, I mean, whatever that might be. It's sometimes hard to help a first-year student say, okay, you did all these things in high school. You know, doing more doesn't mean that you're doing well. It just means that you've added a lot of things. So let's peel back some layers and really think about, why do you do the things you've done? What brings you joy? What brings you energy and engagement? And how might those connect to your first-year experience at Dickinson, or perhaps your four-year experience? And again, that might help with thinking about a major. That might help with thinking about a faculty member with whom you might seek out to be a mentor or an advisor. That might link to a college dean that you feel like, wow, that person has some background experiences that I'd be interested in. That might help you connect with a member of the administration in a way that you never thought about, because you have some shared life experiences along the way. So I would say that it's not a 4-credit course. We don't have kind of a year-long orientation course or even a semester orientation course. Probably the closest we come to that, and this is pretty far away, but the closest would be a first-year seminar. That is an academic course. That is not an orientation class. However, there are 16 or fewer first-year students. All of those first-year students read through the descriptors. They pick 6 choices. So my take on that is, those are 6 things that interest you. One of them is assigned. Hopefully the other 15 members of your seminar chose the same way. So you all have an interest in the topic. The faculty member teaching the course, in 99% of the cases, serves as the academic advisor. So he or she stays with the student until a major is declared, which can happen by the end of first year, but definitely by the end of the second year. So that instructor sees the students in class 2 to 3 times a week, that entire first semester, and stays with the student until they've figured things out. So they talk about course selection. They talk about transition to the res hall. They talk about, are you finding a niche on campus? Are you finding your people? You know, are you finding a club, an activity, an organization? So that really does support the work of the first year programs office as well. The leadership piece is woven all throughout. The civic action and learning piece is woven all throughout. We have a center for advising, internship, and lifelong career. We start introducing things to first-year students so they have an awareness of. They do externship opportunities, or can choose to do externship opportunities during the winter break. That's great for first and second-year students. Builds them up for the internship experiences we think they'll do in junior and senior year, or during the summer, or prep for that research project, or write a chapter of a book with a faculty member. So there's lots of ways that we're connecting with and engaging with students to help them transition to the work of being a college student, and the energy and excitement of being a college student.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Very, very much. Well, thank you very much, Cathy, for taking time. I know this is spring break. I know you have tons of people on campus. I know we're counting down to May 1. So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and to share this with our audience. So
thanks so much, Cindy. I appreciate it. It was great being with all of you today.